what does it look like for you in the now, like to embrace who you are and what you look like, especially as it relates to your complexion? What does embracing that look like for you?
I don't know if anyone's heard this, but like in friendships, I guess, people are always like, oh, there's always gonna be that dark-skinned girl and the light-skinned girl. Like, it can't be two dark-skinned girls or two light-skinned girls. You gotta cancel it out. And in relationships or anything like that. And it just breaks my heart because, especially if you're in a relationship and you say, oh, you're dark skinned, you can't marry another dark skin or have a child with another dark skin because your baby's gonna be ugly. Why does that equate to a baby being ugly? It's literally a baby, like, right. It's not even here yet, you know? And there's already so much hatred toward that child. And then I feel like there's so much being said like, oh, black is beautiful, but I feel like people say it so they can believe it instead of them actually believing it. Because you're saying black is beautiful, yet you're telling your child not to go outside in the sun, you know? Yet you're telling your child, oh, marry a white person or marry someone lighter so your child can have light skin privilege. You know what I mean?
Right.
You should fall in love with someone or be friends with someone because you want to be, not because of the privilege that it can get you or get them. And I feel like it's so deeply rooted in our culture that it's just hard to talk about, like, but we need to talk about it. And people shy away from this conversation too much.
Absolutely. Man, all of it, really. I think one of the stories that comes to mind is I was talking to a friend of mine. She's Colombian, and her husband is Dominican, and he's dark-skinned. He's like my complexion. And she was, they were having a conversation when, 'cause she has 3 children, 3 boys, and they were having a conversation before their eldest child was born, and she was saying how, she hopes that he comes out with darker skin because she thinks it's beautiful and she would love to help him embrace that and all that stuff. And he was like, absolutely not. Like he wanted to have light-skinned children. And she was like, well, why? And what are you saying about yourself? And basically he was like, their lives will be easier if they're just light-skinned, right? So part of it, yes, there's a lot of internalized stuff that's happening, but also part of it is like how folks think about survival. Like how is it it's already gonna be difficult, being Black or, Latino in this world. Like, let's make it easier. Hopefully you have light skin, so maybe you can pass, right? And it's just like, it's so interesting to hear like how people think about it and what shifts their perspective around it. Like if they're having children, how they date, what their preferences are. It comes into play in so many things. And then the other thing you mentioned about like the one light skin friend and dark skin friend, like that was like in high school, like my Puerto Rican friend, it was like me and her. And like, it was just so weird, like that dynamic between the two of us, because while I noticed it, she never really talked about it or addressed it. Like like we would go out, like go places, and like sometimes, specifically white folks, for some reason they wanted to prove to me that like they were like good. So they start showing me like pictures of their mixed babies. They're like, oh yeah, my boyfriend is Black. So like, I totally get all of that. It's like, good for you. Also, please don't talk to me. Like, you don't have to prove anything to me. And it just felt forced. Like, you may try to be connecting with me, but like, it's making me feel uncomfortable and weird and just like all the things. So, but she never like understood that dynamic. So I was just like, all right, we cool, but I'll see you from afar. But yeah, it's just so weird, like how all of that comes into play and like at all levels, like including like the workplace, school, dating, especially dating, and like having children and stuff like that.
It's been on my mind a lot recently, now that I've decided that I want to like major in theater and game design, and like theater is an industry of like appearances. And like there's so many instances of colorism in film and even on like in stage, which stage theater is something that has only recently begun conquering what is racism and colorism in on Broadway, et cetera. But definitely like acknowledging the privilege that comes with, and obviously I feel like I'm very much in that middle spectrum of like, depending on who I'm with, I'm either the darker skinned person or I am the lighter skinned person. And how that like affects the job opportunities I may have going into a industry of media and where I will be able to go, and how like certain instances of it, I'm like, I hate, like obviously colorism is terrible, and you find yourself being like thankful for certain things, like how my life has been made easier because I am on the lighter skin side of the spectrum, but also hating that is even a thing that I have to think about or have thought about recently, and how much more difficult it is for some of my friends who I know are going into the same industry but are darker skinned than I am and can't get the same roles or are stuck playing like stereotypical roles that they always put darker skinned actors and actresses in.
I think you brought up a really good point, because in the media and like movies and stuff, if they want to cast like a Black woman, it's always someone that looks like you and I. Why don't we cast someone who's dark skinned? Why do we have to have this one image of the Black woman, and most of the time she's light skinned? Like, that just doesn't make any sense to me. And if we do have movies that surround like Black life, Black family, most of the time they're only with light skinned people, or like they have to have the light skinned mom and the dark skinned dad, and then they have like the in between kids. Like, why can't we just have a family of dark skinned people? Like, why is it that we have to whiten up the scene?